The Other Side of Fear, a Backpacker's Memoir by Jenni Reavis. Unhidden Heroines Series, Book Number 1, Chapter 9, After Rehab. Randy rescued me that night and he took me home to his house for a few days. It was a perfect place at that moment. He lived in a small town 30 minutes north of Oklahoma City on a 2-acre lot a few blocks away from the main part of town. It was nature. It was quiet. It was peaceful, or at least in comparison to what I had been dealing with lately. There wasn't time to get comfortable at Randy's, though. He'd been notified that he only had a few days to find a place to live, as the owners were foreclosing on the property. I had to figure out what to do with my life. My soul needed a safe place to rest for a long time, but I had nowhere to do that. If I stopped moving, life would run me right over, and life had proven to me that I couldn't depend on anyone else to carry me. Almost a year after that hellish week, here I was starting from scratch with no car, money, or job, just painful pieces scattered inside of me that were an even bigger mess from so much endless partying and meaningless sex with strangers. I knew I needed to start seeing a therapist or someone to help me with the things that were such a mess inside. It wasn't just about choosing not to do drugs. It was really deep roots of pain that led me to the path of doing them. I had to address those roots, but I didn't have time or money for any of that. If I didn't start working, I would be homeless. I would have to take time to feel later. Nobody knew where I was tucked away at Randy's house. My dad kept calling. "Where are you?" he demanded. Suddenly, he cares. "I have your car. Your brother's using it right now while he's in town on summer break because his car is in the shop. Just give me the word and I will get back to you." He also told me that family members who helped pay my rehab expenses were demanding to know if they would get any money back since I quit early. Nobody really cared about my disheveled, devastated state. They wanted their money. Valley Hope had called me when they figured out I was missing and told me they would be willing to give a partial refund if I gave up the name of the person who had drugs on their property. There was no way I was going to snitch, so there was no refund. I never wanted to accept anything from my dad ever again. Not only were his gifts always attached to conditions, but now I knew that he would easily take them away whenever he didn't approve of what I was doing. Usually in the moment when I needed the help the most. He insisted that I come live with him. I wouldn't pay rent and I could have my car. From his house, I could work, save money, and take classes. He always insisted I needed to walk this path with my life as if it would magically fix everything. I told him I would think about it to get him to go away. I needed a place to stay regardless. Lisa was going her own way and Randy was unstable. My dad was not an option I was willing to take. I didn't have any friends with houses or an extra couch where I could crash safely. That left my mom. My mom was insistent I stay with her. She wanted a place in my life and felt entitled to it after jumping through hoops to help me get into rehab. She was finally settled into the house she purchased when I found out about her betrayal with my then boyfriend. She had officially moved into the house shortly after my life fell apart. Actually, my ex-boyfriend was a professional painter with the high-end clients in the richest neighborhoods around Oklahoma City. He had done the fancy paintwork in her new kitchen and living room. I remember discovering their affair after I left work late one night. I called both their phones, but neither answered. It occurred to me that he could be helping her work at her new house and simply lost track of time. Maybe they had the music turned up and couldn't hear their phones. I drove to the house and was alarmed when both of their cars were there. The house was completely dark and still no one answered any of the doors or phone calls. I was locked out. I assumed they must have gone to the neighbors or something. When the truth came out, I felt incredibly stupid. It was obvious now they had been there and ignored me being in the full bliss of each other, christening the new house in erotic ways. I knew they were because that's what he and I did whenever my mom was at work. I hadn't used a condom with him, and I imagined he didn't use one with her either, a closeness I never imagined sharing with my mom. I wondered if he even washed his dick off before switching us out one for the other. I didn't want to live there. I never wanted to visit there ever again, not once in the history of forever, not only because of the terrible memories of that house, but Yukon would forever be the home of my rape. The town plastered with newspapers hosting my story on the front page. The whole package was a barrel full of triggers for me, and I had no clue how I would manage to stay sober from drugs. Lisa had found a job at the On-Q gas station on the corner of Reno and MacArthur. She could get me a job connection there if I wanted, which sounded much more appealing than turning in piles of applications to places all over town. For the time being, I stayed at my mom's and decided I would let all the toxic trauma triggers be motivation for me to work as hard as I could to get the fuck out of there. As much as I dreaded doing it, all I needed was to get my car from my dad's house. A few days later, I got a call for an interview at OnCue. So many things were working out perfectly. I got the job, I got my car back, and now it was time to hustle hard. The store manager had recently fired several employees at once for stealing. So I had a guaranteed set schedule of 40 hours during the week, plus as many shifts as I wanted to pick up. OnCue not only gave me a sense of self-worth and empowerment to be independent again after rehab, but it gave me the structure to stick out a healthy routine. The more I worked, the less I was at my mom's house, or in Yukon for that matter. I spoke just as much Spanish on my shifts as I did English, and I loved helping resolve conflicts through interpreting. It reconnected me with my beloved Latino culture. My customers and my work family were the reason I woke up every day happy to go to work. They were my security blanket. Seeing the ones who came in every single morning for 24-ounce coffee, a pack of Camel Blues, and a honey bun. Having their cigarettes ready and starting their day off with a positive word and a smile made me feel important to their day. And they did the same for me. One of our regulars who I will never forget is Garvin, a homeless veteran who would wheel himself through the back door of the store. He had lost his leg somehow, but he had never had proper treatment to take care of amputations. The stubs were rotting off with gangrene, and they were covered in maggots eating his flesh alive. He would panhandle long enough to come inside for a tall beer and a cheap pack of light smokes that his cupful of change would buy, and he slept in a nook between two businesses right there at Reno and MacArthur. He was always so happy and would usually say something ornery to try to flirt with me, with a stubbed out half cigarette dangling from his toothless mouth. I would banter back with him, "Garvin, you must be drunk already. Where in the world have you been partying without me?" The manager hated him coming in because he stunk and obviously would ward off customers with those green and purple maggoty stumps that he whipped around in his wheelchair. Sometimes when it was my turn to stock the grill, I would sneak the old food that was supposed to go in the trash into a paper bag to bring him to his hidey hole. When my shift was over, I would bring the stale food and a couple of big-ass beers, and we would sit there and talk about life. He was so funny, full of stories and sadness. What I gathered from his stories is that his injuries were military-related. When he came back from his mission abroad, he also came back fucked up in the head because of everything he survived. And he didn't get help. He drank about it, which eventually caused him to lose his family, which made his addiction worse, which eventually left him homeless. Neither of us realized at the moment how much we had in common. The maggots that were eating him alive on the outside were like the ones I had felt on the inside. Our stories connected in abstract ways, and I was able to listen to him and understand him in a way that most didn't because of my own suffering. I was able to see the aftermath of what happens inside of a human if healing doesn't occur, but I couldn't think about that then. I didn't have time to heal or feel. I had to keep hustling hard, or else I would be homeless too. 3 months into my time at OnCue, my district manager pulled me into the back room to ask me whether I would be interested in a level 2 supervisor position at a store on the south side of the city. The area was mostly Hispanic, and they desperately needed a bilingual supervisor to help the store manager on a second shift. I jumped at the opportunity, not only for the new challenges it would give me, but also because of the slight pay increase and benefits it would give me. It also came with a set schedule agreed on ahead of time, which would allow me to be consistent with taking classes to be working toward my degree. I learned how to do inventory and do store orders for merchandise. I enjoyed managing, and the employees who worked during my shifts loved being a part of our shift. We were a family. I was still allowed to pick up extra shifts if I wanted, which I did, and I spoke Spanish the whole time I was at work. My dream of traveling was still tucked away. Even though the tiny ember was barely glowing, at least it was still warm in there somewhere. Connecting with the Latino culture at work helped me tremendously. My morale was considerably higher compared to where I was mentally just 3 months prior. It seemed so long ago that I had been on death's doorstep in rehab. I remained sober from drugs, and I had drinks every now and then, but I had a bigger drive in me this time around. My wounds were still there for sure, but I had a renewed vision for living my life. My new favorite professor, Dr. Dernert, reached out to me concerned that I had not continued my enrollment in the degree program. Since I was working so much overtime at OnQ, I decided I would be able to afford the spring semester, so as soon as the spring schedules opened, I enrolled and paid my tuition up front. Now it was time to find my way out of Yukon and out of my mom's house. OnQ offered free beverages for public service professionals such as firefighters, police officers, and EMT drivers. I became friends with most of the cops and sometimes helped them interpret for different conflicts. They were in the store often between calls and would hang out in a small group at the end of my counter. About a month into my new role, one of my regular cops shared some interesting information. Obama is offering a stimulus for first-time home buyers. If you have good credit, you should consider looking into buying your first home. My wife's a realtor. You have a set salary here. There's a high chance you could get approved for a home loan. Just food for thought. He tossed his wife's business card on the counter before leaving with the other officers to go take a call. After having my experience abroad, I had never considered buying a home, at least not in the United States. I knew that I at least wanted to finish my associate degree before I left the country again, and that I would need to work as hard as I could until then and try to save for a life abroad. Buying a home now seemed like something way too big to bite off. But was it? I wouldn't know unless I checked it out, and I found out that I did indeed qualify for a home loan. I began looking at houses, and I found a home close to my store for a great price. It was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house planted on a corner lot with a huge yard that had beautiful landscaping left behind by previous owners. The payment was right at the range of where I wanted it to be for my income and my budget. I knew that by signing the paperwork, I was committed to working so much that I would never see the light of day. But I feared that I would regret it if I did not try. I finally had security with my job. I wanted security with my living arrangement after so many instances of being on the brink of homelessness. I decided to take the leap. I was going to be a homeowner. I was prepared to do everything it took to stay afloat. I felt like I was taking my power back in some way, and for that, I had this inner victory party about my decision. But on the day of my signing, the whole drive to my broker's office, I could not shake the feeling that I was making a huge mistake.